Thank you. Thank you, Tucson. And let me begin by saying that we have done rallies all over this country, and we've had great people, trade unionists, environmentalists, women's advocate, introducing us, but I have never heard people, young people, give the kinds of introductions and statements that I heard tonight in Tucson. And what it tells me, and Raul made this point, what it tells me is that when we stand together as white and black and Latino and Native American and Asian American, when we stand together, there is nothing that can stop us from transforming this country. And let me just start off by thanking Congressman Raul Grijalva, not only for his friendship for so many years, not only for his co-chairmanship of the Progressive Caucus, but for his decades of fighting for civil rights for all, of how much we owe to the first Americans, and that we will protect them. And let me thank that young man, Bob De La Rosa. And let me thank those two young ladies, Maria Isabel and Maria Teresa Aguino, for that wonderful rendition of the national anthem. Frankly, it is hard to follow in the footsteps of these young people, beautiful young people. Make us all so proud. Now, I am often asked by the media why it is that we attract turnouts like this, why so many people in Tucson are out tonight, why 24,000 people were out in Boston last week, why 28,000 people a couple of months ago were out in Portland, Oregon. And the media is asking, why is this happening? Why is it happening that we are raising money without a super PAC? We were all told, all of the political experts said that the only way you can compete is by begging millionaires and billionaires and super PACs for money. We said no. And our campaign has received 650,000 individual contributions. And the average contribution, and this warms my heart, the average contribution is not $2,000, it's not $50,000, it is $30 a person. How's that? This is a people's campaign, not a billionaire's campaign. And when the media asks, how is all of this happening? Who is going to respond to the call for a political revolution? It turns out that the people in Tucson and people all over this country are prepared to stand up, as Raul said, and make sure that our government belongs to all of us and not just a handful of billionaires. The truth is that the American people are sick and tired of establishment politics. They are sick and tired of establishment economics. The people of this country understand that almost all of the new wealth and income being created is going to the top 1%. And the American people are saying loud and clear, we want an economy that works for workers, not just the very rich. And the American people understand that as a result of the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, you know about Citizens United, that as a result of that decision, our campaign finance system, our political system is totally corrupt and American democracy is being undermined. Before I get into the thrust of my remarks, I wanted to take a brief moment to tell you what I expect most of you already know, and that is that today, on 2 campuses in our country, one at Texas Southern University, a student was shot and killed, and one other was wounded. And as you know, in your own state, at Northern Arizona State University in Flagstaff, one student was killed and 3 were wounded. Now, it goes without saying that our condolences go to the families of those who were killed, and our hearts and prayers go out for a full recovery for those that were wounded. But we also know that we are tired of condolences and we are tired of just prayers. We are tired and we are embarrassed in picking up the paper or turning on the TV and seeing children in elementary schools slaughtered and young people on college campuses shot. And the truth of the matter is, I wish I could tell you otherwise, the issue of gun violence is not going to be solved easily. But just because it is not going to be solved easily does not mean that we do not address it and do the best we can. Now, I come from a state of Vermont, thank you, and I invite you all up, especially in the summer, and we'll come here in the winter. How's that? I come from a state which has a history going back to its very creation of people owning guns and hunting and doing target practice. But the truth, and having virtually no gun control at all today. But what the people of Vermont understand is that we need to have a serious conversation and stop the yelling and demeaning of all people involved in this issue. Overwhelmingly, the American people understand that it is crazy that people who should not own guns do own guns. They understand overwhelmingly that not only do we need to strengthen the instant background check, we need to broaden it as well. And they understand that it makes no sense that we have a loophole in the law so that people can go to gun shows and buy weapons without having to go through the instant background check. People understand that's wrong, and that has got to change. And there are many people in this country who do not understand why we are selling and distributing, allowing to be distributed, assault weapons which have only one function, and that is the killing of people. And people do not understand why we do not have legislation to prevent people from buying guns legally, but then selling it to criminals, the so-called straw man situation. And also what people don't understand is that in my state and all over this country, there are people who are experiencing severe emotional problems. All over this country, we have thousands of people who are suicidal, who are homicidal, but they cannot get the help they need when they need it. We need a revolution in mental health delivery in this country. Somehow, if you are involved in an automobile accident and you're hurt, you get rushed to an emergency room and you get good care. People save your lives. But if you are suffering a mental breakdown and you are suicidal or you're a homicidal, you may not be able to find the care you need because there aren't doctors or counselors available, or you cannot afford that care. That's wrong. So I think while, yes, there are disagreements of how we go forward in terms of gun safety, I think the vast majority of the American people want us to move forward in sensible ways which keeps guns out of the hands of people who should not have that and cuts down on these senseless murders that we see every week. And let me also say a word on an issue that I know is obviously of enormous consequence all over this country, but maybe more in Arizona than in many other areas. And that is the issue of immigration reform. And let me begin by saying I know a little bit about immigration, because my father came to this country at the age of 17 from Poland. He came to this country not speaking a word of English, came to this country without a nickel in his pocket, and he never made a whole lot of money. I grew up in a 3.5-room rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, New York. And my mother's dream was that someday maybe our family would own its own home and not have to rent. That never happened. She died young, and her dream never came to pass. But my parents, both of them, were enormously proud, my father maybe especially, to see his two sons go to college, and he enjoyed the opportunities that America gave him, and there was no prouder American than that young man who came to this country at the age of 17. Now, my family's story is a story very similar to many people who are here tonight. And that story is the story of America. It is the story of hardworking families coming into this country to create a brighter future for their children. It is a story rooted in family and fueled by hope. It is a story that continues to this day in families all across our country. Today, as everyone here knows, we have 11 million people in this country who are undocumented, who came to this country to improve their lives, to escape oppression, fleeing desperate poverty and violence. Let's be frank. Today's undocumented workers play an extraordinarily important role in our economy. Without these workers, it is likely that our agricultural system would collapse. Undocumented workers are doing the hardest work in this country. They are harvesting our crops, building our homes, cooking our meals, caring for our kids. They are part of the fabric of this country. 11 million people came to this country so they could feed their families, escape gang violence, and desperate economic circumstances. Let me also be very clear that people came to this country because they knew that there were jobs, and if anyone thinks that employers throughout America didn't know that the workers they were hiring were undocumented, they would be dead wrong. That is the reality of where we are. Employers were complicit, hiring undocumented workers for low wages. That's the fact. Slave wages, all right. And let me tell you a little story, if I might. Back in 2007, as the senator from Vermont, I went to a place called Immokalee, Florida. Anybody know where Immokalee, Florida is? What is unique about Immokalee, Florida, a small town near Naples, that's where they grow most of the tomatoes, low-grade tomatoes used by McDonald's and Burger King. I went there. On the day that I visited, just coincidentally, the U.S. attorney was bringing charges against a contractor for slavery. In 2007, people were being held involuntarily to work in the fields. And I saw the working conditions and the exploitation that these workers experienced. And I saw the horrendous housing that they lived in. And I'm happy to tell you that we had a hearing on this issue in Washington. We made some progress. Wages went up. Working conditions went up. But the truth is, there are many Immokalees all over this country where undocumented workers are being exploited. And when you exploit people who cannot defend themselves, when you exploit people by paying them low wages, what you are doing is creating a race to the bottom for every worker in America. And let me tell you something else. People can have disagreements about immigration reform. But in the year 2015, it is not acceptable to be stooping to racism and demagoguery in order to win some political votes. It is not acceptable. It is not American to be defining a whole group of people who happen to come from Mexico and calling them criminals and rapists. We have fought too hard in this country for hundreds of years to end racism, to end discrimination, to revert in 2015 to that kind of ugly language. Now, in 2013, I proudly supported comprehensive immigration reform legislation that passed the U.S. Senate. Now, this is not, and I do not. The Senate bill contained the provisions of the DREAM Act, which I strongly support, and which would offer the opportunity of permanent residency and eventual citizenship to young people who are brought to the United States as children. It is my belief that we should recognize the young men and women who comprise the Dreamers for what they are, American kids who deserve the right to legally be in the country which is their home. The Senate bill was far from perfect, but at least it began the process of moving us in the right direction. It is beyond my comprehension that the House of Representatives has not yet even begun the discussion on immigration. Instead of reverting to racism, maybe they want to deal with this issue in a serious way. Until we can pass comprehensive immigration reform, we must be as aggressive as we can in pursuing policies that are humane and sensible and that keep families together. And this includes taking measures that are currently available, including using the presidential power of executive orders when appropriate. While the Senate passed the DREAM Act in its immigration bill, and while the House has not yet acted, I think President Obama did exactly the right thing through his executive order for deferred action for childhood arrivals. DACA, as it is called, was a good first step, but should be expanded. Deferred action should be expanded to include the parents of citizens, parents of legal permanent residents, and the parents of dreamers. Our job is to bring families together, not tear them apart. And when we talk about issues facing this country beyond gun violence, beyond immigration, We are talking about the fact that in the United States today, we have more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth, and it is worse today in America than at any time since 1928. Let me be very clear. There is something profoundly wrong in this country when the top 1/10 of 1% own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That is not what America is supposed to be about. There is something profoundly wrong when in Arizona and Vermont and all over this country, people are working 2 or 3 jobs. People are working incredible hours in order to put food on the table, and yet 58% of all new income is going to the top 1%. That's wrong. There is something wrong in this country when in recent years we have seen a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires, and yet we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. That's wrong. There is something wrong when in the last 2 years, the 14 wealthiest people in this country, 14 people, have seen their wealth increase by $156 billion. That is more wealth than is owned by the bottom 130 million Americans. What this campaign is about is sending a message to the billionaire class. And that message is, you cannot have it all. Our message to the greedy is that you, as billionaires, are not going to get more tax breaks when children in America go hungry. You are not going to provide huge compensation packages to the CEOs of large corporations at the same time as you're cutting the health care and the wages and the pensions of your workers. Ain't gonna happen. But what this economy is about is not just the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. It is about the fact that, yes, we are a lot better off economically today than we were when Bush left office. That's true. You know, my Republican friends suffer from a very peculiar disease. It's called short-term amnesia. Their view is that Barack Obama has caused every problem in the history of the world. Yet they forgot that 7 years ago, 800,000 people a month were losing their jobs. They seem to have forgotten that the world's financial system, as a result of the greed and recklessness of Wall Street, was on the verge of collapse. And they seem to forget, great deficit hawks that they were, that under Bush we ran up the largest deficit in the history of America. But while we are better off today than we were 7 years ago, there is another truth, and that is, for the last 40 years, the great middle class of this country has been disappearing. What we have seen in recent years, an explosion of technology, workers being far more productive, and yet most of our people are working longer hours for lower wages. What we have seen is median family income in this country going down by $4,000 since 1999. What we have seen is male workers, the average male worker in the middle of the economy, making hundreds of dollars less than he did 40 years ago, and women making less today than they did 7 years ago. And what the political revolution that we are involved is about is, yes, we are going to create an economy that works for all of us and not just the people on top. And I want to say a word about unemployment. It's not talked about enough. Real unemployment in this country, if you include those people who have given up looking for work and the many who are working part-time, ain't 5%. It is 10%. And now let me tell you something that very few people talk about, and that is the crisis of youth unemployment in this country. A couple of months ago, I asked some economists to do a study for me, and I asked them to tell me what real youth unemployment and underemployment was for high school graduates, not dropouts, high school graduates between the ages of 17 and 20. And this is what they told me. For white kids, real unemployment, 33%. For Latino kids, real unemployment, 36%. For African American kids, real unemployment, 51%. In other words, we are turning our backs on an entire generation of young people who want to stand up on their own 2 feet. They want to earn some money. They want to get out of the house. They want to begin their lives as adults. And what we are saying to them is there are no jobs available for you. But let me tell you something else that we are saying to these young people. Today in America, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. 2.2 million people in jail, disproportionately black and Latino. Now, it seems to me when you have youth unemployment at 30, 40, or 50%, maybe, just maybe, it makes sense to invest in education and jobs rather than jails and incarceration. Here is a promise. Here is a promise. I don't make a whole lot of campaign promises. You got one here tonight. If elected president, the United States of America will not have more people in jail than any other country on earth. We're going to send our young people to jobs and school, not to jails. And when we talk about the economy in America today, and when we talk about why people are working such long hours, so many jobs, it has everything to do with the fact that wages in America are just too damn low. As all of you know, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Now, you can do the arithmetic as well as I can. You multiply 7 1/4 or $8 by 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, and what you end up with is not enough money to take care of a family. And that is why I believe that the minimum wage has got to be raised to a living wage, $15 an hour. And when we talk about fair wages, I hope every man here will stand with the women and fight for pay equity for women workers. There is no rational economic reason why women are earning 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. It is simply sexism. It's got to end. Now, in the campaign season, we often hear a whole lot about family values, Republican family values. They just stay up nights worrying about families. But you all know that when Republicans talk about family values, what they are talking about is their belief that women in this country should not have the right to control their own bodies. I disagree. And when they talk about family values, what they are talking about is that our gay brothers and sisters should not have the right to get married. I disagree. My wife, Jane, who you just met, and I have been married for 27 years. We have 4 great kids and 7 beautiful grandchildren. We believe in family values, but they're not Republican family values. At the top of my list of family values is for the United States to end the international embarrassment of being the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid family medical leave. When a working class woman has a baby, she should not be forced to go back to work a week or 2 weeks after the birth of that baby. And that is why I believe that our country has got to join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee at least 3 months of paid family and medical leave. And brothers and sisters, when we talk about the economy, what is always on people's minds is the issue of jobs, jobs, jobs. People understand how difficult it is to go out and get a job that pays a living wage. Well, it seems to me that if real unemployment is 10%, if youth unemployment is 30, 40, or 50%, the United States government must undertake a massive federal jobs program to put millions of people back to work. I want to see this country hiring teachers, not firing teachers. I want to see cities and towns hiring child care workers so that our kids get the quality child care they need. And when our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, water systems, rail, airports, levees, and dams are collapsing all over this country, I want to see millions of workers getting back to work, rebuilding that infrastructure. And when we talk about the economy, we cannot help but talk about the greed and fraud and dishonesty and arrogance of those who work on Wall Street. All of you know that as a result of the greed and recklessness and illegal behavior of Wall Street, this country was driven into the worst economic downturn since the 1930s. Now, what some of you may not know, you may not know this, but today 3 out of the 4 largest banks are much larger today than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. When we have 6 banks in this country issuing 2/3 of the credit cards and over 35% of all mortgages, in my view, when you have 6 large banks that have assets equivalent to 60% of the GDP of this country, when you have banks that are too big to fail, in my view, they are too big to exist. We've got to break them up. I want to see a financial system where credit unions and community banks are out there making loans to small and medium-sized businesses, not a Wall Street, which is an island unto itself, only concerned about their profits. And brothers and sisters, when we talk about what's going on in this country today, there is one issue which impacts every other issue. And that is that 5 years ago, by a 5-4 vote, the United States Supreme Court ruled through Citizens United that millionaires and billionaires would be able to purchase the United States government. What they said is to the wealthiest people in this country, they said, you guys already own much of the economy. We are now going to give you the opportunity to own the government. And the result of that is the wealthiest people in this country are pouring huge amounts of money into campaigns in order to elect candidates whose sole function in life is to represent the rich and the powerful. You have one family in America, the second wealthiest family, the Koch brothers. This is a smart crowd, okay. You got this family, and what they want to do is they don't want to cut Social Security. They want to eliminate Social Security. They don't want to cut Medicare. They want to eliminate Medicare and Medicaid and the Environmental Protection Agency. They don't want to simply not raise the minimum wage. They want to do away with the concept of the minimum wage so workers can work for $3 or $4 an hour. Now, this family is going to spend some $900 million in this election cycle. In other words, what democracy has become is you have one vote, they have one vote, plus $900 million. Now, when you have one family spending more money on a campaign than either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, you are not talking about democracy, you are talking about oligarchy, and we have got to stop that. So here is my second promise to you tonight, and that is that no nominee of mine to the U.S. Supreme Court will get that position unless he or she is loud and clear in telling the American people that they will vote to overturn Citizens United. And by the way, when we talk about democracy, and we talk about the fact that brave men and women throughout our history have fought and died to defend democracy, it is important to say a word about those Republican governors and legislatures who are trying to suppress the vote all over this country. Now, I've been involved in a lot of elections. Sometimes I've lost, sometimes I've won. But it has never occurred to me to figure out a way to deny the vote to people who disagree with me and who would vote against me. I regard it as an act of grotesque political cowardice for people to not have the guts to go out in a free and fair election, to think the only way they can win is to make it harder for low-income people or young people or people of color or seniors to vote. And my suggestion to those people, if you are afraid of a fair election, get another job. So if I have anything to say about it, and I will, if elected president, there will be one law for 50 states in this country, and that is if you're 18 years of age, you are registered to vote. End of discussion. When we talk about democracy, let me tell you what I want to see. I want to see this country have one of the highest voting turnouts of any country, not one of the lowest voter turnouts. And I want to see anybody here tonight, regardless of their political views, if you want to run for office, I want you to be able to run for office without having to beg campaign contributions from wealthy people. And that is why I support public funding of elections. And let me touch on another issue of enormous consequence. We live, as all of you know, in a highly competitive global economy. And if we are going to succeed now and in the future, we need the best educated workforce in the world. That means that when mom and dad go to work, they know that their kids are in high-quality pre-K programs that they can afford. It means that our public schools and our teachers are adequately funded. And this is what it also means. It means that in America, and we've got legislation in to do this, every public college and university must be tuition-free. It is totally, think about it for a second. We have hundreds of thousands of bright young people in this country. They are qualified, they're ready to go to college. They can't go for one reason. Their families lack the money. What we are doing is pulling out the ladder from right underneath them to give them the opportunity to make it into the middle class, to become teachers or doctors or engineers or scientists. That is unfair to those young people, but it is unfair to the future of this country. Our job is to capture the best intellects that we can and to say to young people, you can't get the education because your families lack the money is totally absurd. Totally absurd. And what we are also going to deal with is the absurd situation today of millions of young people and people not so young who are struggling with high levels of student debt. Now, 2 years ago, I spoke to a young woman in Burlington, Vermont. Her dream was to go to medical school, become a primary care physician for low-income people, exactly what we need. Her penalty for doing what this country desperately needs was coming out of school $300,000 in debt. All over this country, there is a dental crisis. We need dentists. We need to make sure that people can afford to go to dentists, that they can access dentists. Young dentists I saw in Iowa came out of school $400,000 in debt. All over this country, people are graduating school deeply in debt. They're paying 25% of their incomes on student debt. Now, what I don't understand when we talk about student debt, how does it happen that people are stuck with student debt interest rates of 6, 8, 10% when you can refinance your home for 2, 3, 4%? So our legislation will allow people to refinance at the lowest interest rates they can find. It will get the government out of the business of profiteering on working class families. Now, people say, well, it's a great idea, Bernie, but it is expensive. They're right, it is expensive. It's going to cost about $70 billion a year. You know how we're going to pay it? We're going to pay for it by a tax on Wall Street speculation. When Wall Street collapsed in 2008, they came begging the taxpayers of this country, oh, please bail us out, we'll be good boys. Well, now it's Wall Street's turn to bail out the middle class. And when we talk about our responsibilities as human beings and as parents, there is nothing more important than leaving our planet healthy and habitable for our kids and our grandchildren. Pope Francis is right. The debate is over. The scientific community is virtually unanimous. Climate change is real. It is caused by human activity, and it is already causing devastating problems throughout our country and much of the world. We have a moral responsibility to lead the world, to work with China and Russia and India, countries all over this world, in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And when we talk about the needs of the American people and where we want to go as a nation, I hope that every person here knows that there is only one major wealthy nation on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. That is the United States of America. That has got to change. The Affordable Care Act has done a lot of good, and I was proud to support it, but we have got to go further. $29 million people still have no health insurance, and many more are underinsured with high premiums and high deductibles. In my view, we have got to move toward a Medicare for all single-payer program. Health care is a right of all people, not a privilege. And when we talk about where we want to go as a nation, we have got to understand that while we have come a long way in overcoming discrimination and racism and prejudice, sadly and tragically, racism remains alive and well in America. And I promise you my third promise: there will be no president who will fight harder to end institutional racism in this country and reform a broken criminal justice system. There are 2 points I want to make now. And the first point, maybe the most important point, is that no president, not Bernie Sanders, not anybody else, can address the enormous problems that we face in this country today. And I've touched on some of them, and some I haven't even touched on. Enormous problems. No president alone can do that. And you know why? Because let me tell you what no other candidate will tell you. The powers that be in this country, that is corporate America, Wall Street, the corporate media, the large campaign donors, they are so powerful that no president alone can effectively take them on and bring about the changes that we need in this country to improve lives for working people. The only way that real change takes place is when we make a political revolution in which millions of people, young and old, black and white and Latino and Native American and Asian American, gay and straight, men and women, people who were born in this country, people who were born in other countries. Now, what politics in America is about, and Raul touched on this a moment ago, is our opponents are trying to divide us. They are trying to divide those who were born in this country from those who weren't. They're trying to divide straight people from gay people, men from women. And our antidote is to say to them, no, you're not going to divide us up. We are going to stand together. And we are going to say, yes, you and your super PACs may have all the money, but we have something you don't have. And what we have is look around you tonight. We have the people. And the simple political fact, and this is just a fact of history, is that when people stand together and demand change, we never lose. We never lose. Think about it for a moment. Think about it. Think about the civil rights struggle of millions of people coming together saying, we're going to end segregation and racism in America. Think about women coming together and saying, we're not going to be second-class citizens anymore. Think about the environmental community coming together and say, you have to address the environmental crises that we face. Think about the progress made in recent years, led by the gay community and their straight allies. So when we stand together and we say, you know, we're going to create an economy that just doesn't make the rich richer, but is going to give dignity and security to the elderly, because we are not going to cut Social Security, we're going to expand Social Security. Now, my message tonight is, please do not think small, think big. You are living. Now, we could have, if we were a poor country, we would have a very different type of discussion. If you're a poor country, then people would have to say, it's too bad, we can't afford to send our kids to college. We can't afford health care to all people. Brothers and sisters, you are living today in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. That's the truth. Very few people understand that, because almost all of the wealth is going to the people on the top. It is not utopian thinking to say that when we think big and when we stand together, we can create a situation where every man, woman, and child in this country has health care as a right. Not utopian thinking. It exists in every other major country. It is not utopian thinking to say that we can have the best child care and pre-K system in the world. It is not utopian thinking, because many other countries already do it, to say that public colleges and universities should be tuition-free. Not utopian. It is not utopian to say that the veterans, the men and women who put their lives on the line to defend us, should get the health care and the benefits that they earn. Not utopian. It is not utopian to say that every person in this country, no matter their race, their religion, their disability, their sexual orientation, should be able to realize the full promise of equality that